Hi there once again, and welcome to another Expresso mechanic tutorial. And in this one we're going to be building what you see on the screen, which is known as a Hobson's coupler. It's a way to transfer the power from a horizontal shaft to a vertical shaft, or vice versa, without actually using, say, bevel gears or possibly a universal joint. In fact, a universal joint does not have the range. You won't be able to do something like this. This is turning it through 90 degrees. A universal joint would never be able to do that. So yeah, that's what we're going to be about in this tutorial. So without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. We'll start by bringing in a circle, and the plane will be XY for this. We'll make its radius 5 though, so much smaller, and hit O so that we can see our circle close up. We can then command drag to create a second circle and make the radius 1, and that will give us the center where our drive shaft will be positioned. Create another circle by command dragging, make the radius 0.5 on this occasion, and then finally create a third circle, or sort of fourth circle, and make the radius 3.5. The next thing to do is duplicate circle 2 around circle 3. So we'll select our circle 2 and in our tools, duplicate. Copies will be 5 and it will be a long spline for the mode. So a long spline is what we need to check in there. Drag circle 3 into the spline field and then hit apply. Fantastic. So we've got that far. We can just place that up there. In fact, we'll drop that one into there. That's fantastic. Moving on from here, what we need to do is actually select, in fact, what I will do, I'll put that back up there. I'll just select these 4 and I'm going to close this up and then command drag to duplicate these. And then with them all selected, just click on the XZ plane, because that's what we need to do. We'll select F3 to go into our right hand view, and we need our snapping here. We need this switched on. So with the snapping switched on, we can say that we want grid work plane, and in here just check off grid line. I've already done it, but just check that off because we don't need that. I always do that as a matter of course, and then we can move these into position, and they need to be placed over here, just there, so that we've got this diagonal line running through this particular square of the grid, and that positions them where they need to be. We'll just hit H so we can see everything. The final step, of course, will be to duplicate circle 6 around circle 7. So we'll select that in our tools, duplicate, drag circle 7 into the field and hit apply. Fantastic. So we've got all of that set up. That's the first step along the way to getting this going. Now the next thing to do will be to bring in some null objects, duplicate those around circles 3 and 7, and we'll be using those as targets. I'll bring in a null, and in my tools once again, duplicate, and we'll start with circle 3. So we'll drag that back in to here and hit apply. So now we've got our nulls in the scene. We can just drag this one into here. What I will do is select all of them and change them from their shape here into diamonds. We can see them, they're way too big. I mean, we'll make them 0.3. And there we go, we've got them in position. What I'll also do is change their colors. So I'm going to change them to, I think, a yellow for these. That will do nicely. So they show up very well, and then we can think about renaming them now. Our first one is here, so we'll rename this 1. This will be 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and they actually work in an anti-clockwise direction, as we can see here. So that's how we've set that up. We need to do the same thing again. So bring in another null, tools, duplicate, and this time we want to duplicate around circle 7. Hit apply. Once again, open our null copies, drop this in here, select all of them in the object, change them from dots to diamonds, and 0.3 for their sizes. Once again, let's make this, let's have a look, see where we are, make that in the Y plane, just makes it easier that way. And in fact the others should really be in the X or Z. It's the Z, isn't it? Make them in the Z. Okay, let's just do some more work with these. In our basic tab, I will change their color, make these green, I think this time. So just pull those two down, and then we can think about renaming them. And on this occasion, I'm going to say A, B, C, D, E, and finally F. And again, we can see where these are. So we start there, and then we move down to here. Now, let's just think about this before we go any further. We may actually need to rename these, because I want one, which is here, to match up with A, which is going to happen. So those two are going to match up. But if I wanted to match up 2 with B, that isn't going to work at the moment, because B needs to be over here. So let's do some reworking here. So B actually needs to be F, because it needs to be the last one in the chain. C will need to be E, D will be D, and E will be B. And finally, in fact, I beg your pardon, that will be C, and F will be B. And then we can reorder them so that we've got that correct. And now they will match up. So A will now match up, B will match up with 2. That's definitely going to work, and you can see that the others will accordingly. So that's an important step. Make sure that you do that. Fantastic. So we've got our first stage of getting the targets sorted out. The all-important step is some more targets, which basically are centered between the Y and the ZX axes. And we won't be doing those just yet. That's going to be an important step that we'll be doing a bit later. But anyway, we'll move on from here and do a little bit more work to get this prepared. The next step for us is actually to remove circle 3. We don't need it anymore, and we don't need circle 7. They've served their purposes. What we can then do is, we'll just close the nulls up for a minute. We can work with our circles. So we want all of these, we'll just remove those from there. Select all of those, and then we can connect objects and delete, so that we've got just a single circle. Our nulls we can just drop into our circle, and we can remove our null copies for that one. So that's our first part of this completely set up and ready for the next step. We'll then do the same with what we've got down here. So we can remove that circle's copies. Take all of these out of here, drop this here, select all, connect objects and delete. Just remove that. And then once again our nulls, select all of these, drop them into our circle and remove our null copies. We'll just put a circle there. We can then think about dropping these into extrudes. So let's do that next. If we select both of them, we can hold down our option key, select extrude, and we've done that step. Obviously the extrudes are too big. Let's have a look and see what we can do here. Let's make them a little bit smaller. Let's try 20. Still too big. I think we can probably go 5, and that will be fine. I think that looks really good. In our caps, we can give them some rounding. Let's say 0.5. Too much, we can probably say 0.1. I think that's fine. Yeah, 0.1 looks really nice. So those two are ready to go. The next thing we can do is think about bringing in some cylinder objects to create both our drive shaft and our driven shaft. Let's bring in a cylinder then. So we've got our first one. The radius needs to be 1, and we'll place this plus Z. Its height can be just 20. One height segment, and we'll give it 60 rotation segments. Why not? Let's make it 60 to make it nice and smooth. And then we can simply drag it into place. Let's just switch to our right hand view. We've got our snapping on. Let's just drag it back until it's in position, which is about there. We'll once again, let's go into our caps fillet 0.1 so that it just matches up with what we've got. That's looking really good. Second thing to do, just a command drag to copy a second cylinder. We'll drag this one down here, drop the extrude into it, and we'll call this drive shaft. So we've got that completely set up and ready to go. This second one here, we'll just drop this down here. This will be called driven shaft. And we can drop our extrude into it. We won't do that just yet though, because we've got to position it. So let's change its orientation to +Y. And then we can just, well, what we can do actually is drop it into the extrude and zero it out. We'll do that first, just to get it basically positioned, and then we can drop it up here. And then once again, we know that we've got the snapping on, and we should be able to just drop it into place. Let's just change to our right hand view once again, F3, and let's see where we are. That's it, that's where it needs to be. Okay, so that's positioned, and now we can simply drop the extrude into there, and they're both set up as they need to be. The next thing I'm going to do is bring in another null, name it Expresso, and give it an Expresso tag. We've got the window open and we're ready to start work. This is a very, very simple expression. All we're going to do is drop in the drive shaft and the driven shaft. At the output stage of the drive shaft, I'm going to say coordinates, transform, rotation, rotation B. And at the input stage of the drive shaft, transform, rotation, rotation H. Drop that there, and then we can connect the two, and we should now find if we rotate our drive shaft, we drive our driven shaft, and we do, and we can see that they're responding as they need to. The snapping is still on, so that's why we're getting a little bit of jerkiness in there. We'll turn that off in a minute. Let's just go into our drive shaft here and just reset that to 0. Just zero that out, and then we can remove the snapping. So that's our first expression complete. I mean, it's very, very simple, this one. There will be a second expression that's a little bit more involved, but not too much, but we'll do that a little bit later. But anyway, let's move on from here. I'm going to bring in 6 more nulls, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and just rename them T1 through 6. Okay, so they're ready to go. I'll select them all, and in their basic tab, I will change their color. But what I'll do first is change their object. I'm going to make them circles, 1 centimeter for their radius, okay, on this occasion. And in the basic tab, change their color to cyan. Great, so I've got my targets set up and ready to go. In order to position these, I'm going to need a second Expresso expression, which I just mentioned earlier. So we'll select our Expresso null, add a second Expresso tag, just pull this one over here, and then we're ready to think about what we're going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is bring in an iteration node. So come down to iterator, iteration. it will start from 0 and it will end at 5 because obviously we've got 6 elements. The next thing to do is bring in 3 linked lists. So in our general tab, bring in 1 and then command drag to copy the other 2. Just make the window a little bit bigger. And we can plumb the output from the iteration into the index ports of each of our linked lists. We can now think about populating these. Now the first linked list here, I want all of these in there. So that's our target linked lists. And then we can worry about the other 2. So we'll select this one and populate this with all of these. Finally, select the last one and we're going to populate that one with all of these. So that gets that stage set up. We can then pull in any one of our nulls, it doesn't really matter which, but I'm going to use 1 and A. And at the input stage, give them object ports, connect our linked lists accordingly. And at the output stage, this is where it gets important. Now, what we're going to be using these for is to pass the axes to our targets here. Now, the numbered targets here, we simply want the position Y. We want the Y axis of these because we can see that they're aligned along the Y. So we'll say coordinates global position Y. We need to work with global positions. And in here, we can say coordinates global position X and global position Z. Because we're getting both of those axes from here. We can see that they're aligned, or they're basically going to be moving around both of those axes. So that's important. So we've got that set up. The next thing we can do is bring in T1. Just place this over here. Again, we can give this an object port at the input stage initially. And then global position Y. We'll start with the Y because we're going to bring this into there. And then finally global position X and global position Z. Connect these up. We can then connect this to here. Straight away we can see that things are moving. The X and finally the Z. And now we can see they've all jumped and they are in exactly the right places. And if we then select our drive shaft and rotate it, we can see that we're going to get the correct movement. So that is all working exactly as it needs to. Fantastic. So that's our second and final Expresso expression. There's nothing particularly complicated here. We're just sequencing through all of our targets and making our targets here align correctly by using our targets here. That's all we're doing. Fantastic. So we've got that sorted out. The next thing we can do is make the slides that make all of this hang together. And that's our last step. I'll bring in another circle. Its radius, in fact, what this needs to be, this first one, it needs to actually be an ellipse. What I'll do is drop it into T1 and zero it out. That's the first thing to do. Let's get it there. And then we can work with our object. So we've got it as an ellipse. Radius needs to be 1. Radius Y needs to be 1.4. So that gives us an ellipse. And then in our coordinates, we need to set the rotation P to 45 degrees. And that sets it up. If we switch to our front view, so F4, we can see that it's basically the same size as the circle, and that's what we need to see. So that's great. That's working as it should, and it's in the correct position. The next thing to do is, what I'll do, I'll just duplicate this actually. I'll just put it above. So I've got circle 1 above. In my object tab, I just need to click off ellipse and leave the radius as 1 centimeter. I'll switch to my right hand view, so F3, and then we can think about zooming in a little bit closer and positioning this where we think it ought to be. For a start, we need to zero out our rotation P, and then we can move this into position, and we want it, let's put the snapping on, we want it, let's have a look, see where we are, we want it probably, just move it somewhere there, I would think. So this is our circle here. We want to go a bit further actually. If we go somewhere there, I would say that will give us the shape that we want, because we're going to be coming from here along the top, here along the bottom, and yeah, I would say that that will give us pretty much what we want. So it's just about 4 and a little bit squares away from there. That's fine. If we then select our circle once again here, our ellipse here, and we just command drag to copy that and drop it underneath it, we can, in our object here, set this to the XZ plane this time. Again, we don't want it to be an ellipse, so we'll click that off, and in our coordinates zero this out, and now that's in the correct place. We can then just move this down, and we want it, I think, there, and we can see that that should give us a nice angle bracket for our slide. So that's set up so far. Yeah, we can see that's going to work okay, that's going to look good. So yeah, I'm liking what I'm seeing there. Fantastic. So the next step then will be to place these into a loft. Before I do that, just a little bit of housekeeping. Just take that one away from there, and I'll rename this ellipse so that we know which is which. Okay, let's select all of these, hold down Command and Option, and drop them into a loft. Funny old shape because it's not set up correctly, so let's get that sorted out. We can leave our subdivision U and V as they are, they're fine. The isopalm subdivision U, we can leave that as it is. We want linear interpolation, that's the first thing that we need. And we then need to do a little bit of work with probably our circle here. I think we just need to rotate this through 180 degrees. So let's see what happens when we do. Maybe not. Let's have a look. It may, in fact, I think what it might be is that we need to rotate it this way. If we rotate it through our rotation P, let's just see what we get, if that changes anything. And you can see that it is going to. So let's just make that 180. And there you go. That's solved the problem. And it looks really quite nice now, doesn't it? Again, in our loft, if we select our caps and we just go into our rounding and put 0.1 on there, that should help. What I'll also do now is change the display to garage shading lines, and we'll go to isopalms so that we get a nice looking result there. Okay, so that's our first part done. And let's just do a double check. If we rotate our drive shaft, hopefully everything moves accordingly, and we can see that it does. I'm not worried about the jerkiness, it's just the snap. As I say, I can turn that off again. But that's looking really nice. It's lining up as it should, and we're getting the correct behavior there. Fantastic. Okay, let's move on from here and see where we go next. Basically, we just need the two shafts that move through these holes. That's what we've got to do next. We'll bring in a cylinder, orientate it +Z, make its radius 0.5, its height 20, 1 height segment and 60 rotation segments. We can drop it into T1, zero it out, So we've got it there, and then all we need to do is just switch to our right hand view, zoom out a little bit, and then we can just drag this into place. So we'll drag it somewhere. We just position it somewhere there. I mean, it really doesn't matter. You can just do this by eye. But somewhere around there will be fine. I think that should work for us. So that's our first shaft created. And then we'll command drag to copy it. Set this one up plus Y. Again, we can zero this out. And then we can simply drag this one into position. Let's just switch to our right hand view once again, and we'll drag this one down. Again, we'll just do this by eye. Somewhere around there should be okay for that. And there we go, we've got our first one. Now what we need to do is just copy both, or rather select both of these and just drop them under our circles. And again, we'll just select the drive shaft, do a quick rotation. In fact, we'll switch the snap off now. Do a quick rotation, and we can see that that is behaving exactly as it needs to. So that's all brilliant, that's done. So the next thing to do then is basically copy all of this into here. And then we've got to position that and get it sorted out. So let's see what we can do. Let's command drag to copy this into here. We can zero it out. Let's have a look, see what we can do. Well, I've got drive shaft in there. I don't want that. I want this loft. I want to drop that into there. That's what I want to do, is just zero it out. Just see if that actually gets it into the correct position. I don't think it is completely. Or is it? Maybe it is. No, it's slightly too high. All we've got to do is just move it down and just get it into the correct place. That's basically what we need to do. Let's have a look, see where we are. Let's grow to there, turn on snapping, just drop that down. It still needs to go a little bit further down, I think. Let's just go into our front view, so F4. Just got to make sure this all lines up correctly, which is around there. That's all it is, just get these into position and make sure that they all align correctly. Again, we can select this one, command drag to copy into T3, zero out, and then make the final adjustment as we've done before. Front view, drop this down into there. That'll do nicely. Yep, that's okay. And just keep rinsing and repeating, and that's all you've got to do, and then everything should work out okay. And then just the final one into T6, just zero everything and drop it just about there. And now we should find, if we rotate our drive shaft, that everything marries up, and we can see that it just about does. Oh, I see, I've done those. I've still got to do this side, so let's just go into our top view, hit H so that we can see everything. Let's just get closer. We just need to sort those out, so let's have a look, see where we are. Yeah, our first one's here, so that's okay. So that's, yeah, that's our first loft. Our second one is here. We just need to draw this back into the correct position, which is there. This one, draw that over there. And again, you know, by eye is fine for this. I mean, there's a little bit of leeway on it. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. I mean, you can get it 100% if you really want to, but I think it's perfectly good to do it by eye, as long as it's near enough. That's fine. And then we can play with our drive shaft again, and let's see if we've got everything working. And we can see that it is now, and that's looking really great, isn't it? Fantastic. So that's all done. Let's just close these up, group them into another null. So Option G to group, and just call these targets and close the drive shaft, close this up and just drop this here. Fantastic. And then what we can do is select everything. We can do the Expresso as well for what it is. Group it, call this Hobson's coupler. And we can then move it around the scene and everything will work because we're using global positions. The one thing you can't do, if you wanted to rotate it to an angle, that's not going to work, unfortunately. So you can't do that. You know, it just isn't going to work. You can turn it this way. You can do that. That's fine. But you can't do it in the other two planes. It just doesn't work. So, you know, there is a limit to it, but that's fine. And then I suppose just to finish off, what we can do is select our drive shaft, zero it out, put a keyframe at 0, just record that there, skip through to the end, so click there, put 357 degrees in there, put another keyframe, and then we can play and it will work fine. The last thing that we can do is just go into our F curve here, select this and make it a linear F curve. And now let's see what we get. And we can see that it all works beautifully. So that is how you go about creating a Hobson's coupler. And that completes this tutorial. So as always, I really hope you've enjoyed doing this one and that it's inspired you and given you some ideas that you can perhaps incorporate in your own projects. And if you have enjoyed the video, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and of course, ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be on social media, please do share this video because all this good stuff really does help keep the channel moving in the right direction. But anyway, that just about brings the curtain down on this one. So I'll see you very soon on the next tutorial.